Introducing Apple II, the easy-to-operate home computer. Just hook it up to your TV to create dazzling color displays. Or you can balance your checkbook. Kids can teach themselves arithmetic. Or the family can invent their own Pong games. The possibilities are endless. It's called Apple II, the personal computer.
The Apple II was released at the West Coast Computer Fair in 1977 by Atari alumni Steve Wozniak and Steve Jobs.
When he was getting ready to release the Apple II, he actually went to Nolan Bushnell and asked for funding if they would back his company to bring out this computer, and Atari and Nolan Bushnell said no. Probably not a good decision looking back now.
These things were everywhere, and they were great. They were the workhorses of the, educational computer industry for all of the 80s and honestly a good chunk of the 90s.
This was an important moment, not only for video games and PCs, but for education as well.
The Apple II, obviously, I thought was a great product. I remember growing up in school and playing a lot of it.
Between elementary school and middle school, which is kind of like a long span. You think 8 years, the same damn computer at the school.
And that computer was there before and after that,
yes,
too.
Yes.
But of all these influences, few are more positive than the Apple II, the computer that's used by more schools than any other. It's one influence parents even encourage at home.
Mom, go to practice. Mom?
But we warn you, like many things a kid can pick up in school, it can be contagious.
Back in my day, we didn't use computers. We used rocks and wood. That's how we did our computing.
Pretty much.
Steve Wozniak's pretty much a genius, I think.
Wozniak?
Yeah.
Steve Jobs, thank you guys.
Thank you, Steve Jobs, for inventing the Apple II.
Wow. Rest in peace, Steve Jobs. I still think computers are a fad, though.
Apple becomes a huge success, revolutionizes music players and computers and all that good stuff. Atari ends up publishing Dragon Ball Z fighting games.
There was the Apple II, the Apple IIe, the IIc, and the 2GS, but most people stopped at the 2e, and they kept at the 2e until they hit the mid-90s and they needed a PC.
Have you ever seen the original Apple logo? It's ugly.
So there was no Apple II cult of consumerism back then?
I don't believe so.
Young Steve Jobs was a lieutenant back in the Air Force in the 1930s when the Roswell crash occurred. Now, not many people know this. There were actually 2 downed craft, and then 1 still hovering.
Steve Jobs worked for Atari before going to Apple, and Steve Wozniak actually worked on the Breakout game for Atari. So they really had a kind of a gamer's mindset when they were making the Apple II.
Space Quest series got its start on there. King's Quest got its start on there.
Sierra.
Sierra got their entire start on the Apple II with Mystery House. Beneath Apple Manor was one of the first really great roguelikes on the system. Rogue got its start on there.
Lode Runner, Castle Wolfenstein, Robotron.
Prince of Persia and things of this nature.
No wonder I almost flunked grade school.
I really love the ones, love is a strong word. I really hated the ones where you're in a room and you had to get out and you basically had to type in the directions. You're in a dark room, you have a knife, what do you do? And I just could not use my imagination to figure out anything, basically.
You had a lot of the arcade games released on the 2e, the early ones like Frogger, correct?
You did. You had Frogger. Dig Dug. I remember my grandparents had Dig Dug.
Gold Rush, Oregon Trail, King's Quest.
Oregon Trail. You can't go wrong with Oregon Trail. But
Oregon
you know
Trail.
something? I sucked at the game. I'll admit it right here.
MECC got their name made on the Apple II. They were responsible for such hits as Odell Lake, Oregon Trail, which everyone knows and loves. If you've ever died of dysentery, you probably did it on the Apple II.
And it was fun learning about dysentery and drowning in rivers in the 3rd grade.
Can you imagine a generation of students completely unaware of the dangers of dysentery?
And all I would play was Oregon Trail and the damn thing. I never played another game on the Apple II except
There were
Oregon Trail.
there were over 800 games for that system, and yes, I only played Oregon Trail.
If you had an Apple II, the likelihood of you having legit copies of software just sitting in your bin was slim to none.
I think there's a very good possibility that it is true. In fact, I know it's true. It's true.
my grandparents unknowingly were huge criminals in the 80s because they just had pirated software everywhere.
So Apple, thank you for software piracy.
And that, in a nutshell, is why we protest Wall Street.
What are you babbling about?
Continue.
Electronics is changing so rapidly. And with each change in electronics, it brings something new. So this is not a passing fad.
What is a fad is the kind of games that people like to play.
The first video game crash was not 1983/84.
Nope.
It was 1977.
Wow.
Yes.
Tell me more, John.
Well,
the crash of 77 doesn't really get the props it deserves for almost taking down the video game industry.
Streets.
The problem with 83 was that you had just a giant glut of really crappy games on the market, whereas in 77, you had a glut of pretty crappy consoles.
So the holiday season, end of 77, what are you gonna buy your kids? You got the Studio 2. You have a ton of Pong systems and clones on the market, but they're about to get beaten down.
Cartridge-based systems just came out with the Fairchild F in 76. Almost everything else was just its own console with its own set of games, and you played those games, like however many there were, half a dozen, and then that's it. Go buy the next console for $200.
When everybody and their mom is making a Pong clone, eventually the market's gonna crash on them. So, you know, Mom, why were you making Pong clones? You contributed to this.
When the entire video game market crashes, that's too much Pong.
So, with the Pong clones just glutting up the markets, people wanted something different.
And by the time Christmas of 77 comes along, they are marked down heavily to get them out of the stores.
Coleco actually missed the Christmas season with their new version of the Telstar and stopped that, decided to also go the route of handheld games.
So Coleco at that point pulled out of the console business and went right into handhelds up until ColecoVision.
What you have is really a lot of these more dedicated single handheld systems. I don't think people are ready to buy into consoles yet. And you also got to think, parents are buying these for kids. Color TVs are a fairly new luxury. They don't really want to share the TV.
So with the rise of the handheld games, the market started to crash a little bit.
Okay, in 76 you had Coleco, you had Atari, you had Magnavox, APF, Sears, Walmart, Microsoft, Google. Okay, I think I'm wrong on a few of those, but you get the point. Too many freaking systems.
Soon after the video game crash in 77, the marketplace started to clear out.
The RCA didn't survive. The Fairchild Channel F didn't survive.
There was one Fairchild Channel F, and then another one.
And you can see why people would want to get the cheaper, more portable, and probably a little bit more innovative by that point game than pay the same damn thing over and over from 10 different companies.
The video game crash of 77 pretty much left the marketplace with just handheld electronic games and the new Atari VCS.
The Atari 2600 didn't make money in its first few years out.
The Atari 2600, still fairly new, and unfortunately there wasn't a lot of arcade games out yet that can be featured on the system, so it didn't really catch on yet.
And at the end of the day, it was Atari that actually came out.
If you do not get a strike, bowl your second ball. If you knock down the remaining pins, you get a spare and hear the spare song. That's why these beat out things like the Atari 2600 and 77.
Because they had songs.
The Atari 2600 has no spare song. The Bolatronic, it's got a spare song.
So by the end of the year, you only had Atari and Magnavox that were willing to tough it out and continue producing consoles until the next crash came along.
That would start changing the world of games forever.
Blow everybody's mind.
And then soon it was 1978.
When the video game years returns.
Came out in 78.
I have no idea. That's the next episode. So chill to the next episode.
So I'm not sure if anybody, we should probably do some kind of toss in the next episode.
Yeah, we can. I gotta figure that out. We can always do that later too.